on these small advantages. I was having a combo with Robert Hess in the car on the way back from the airport yesterday. Fun fact, Robert is in town. He'll be hosting tomorrow's SCC with Danya from this chair. And we were ranking Hikaru and Magnus skills, Danya. We were talking about Hikaru's skills of defending and persevering in those resourcefully kind of bad positions. You put it 99 out of 100. And then we said Magnus at converting small advantages is probably 99.99 out of 100, right? He does it better than anybody in history. And right there, it doesn't matter that it was maybe equal. He just finds a way to convert those positions. It's so tough to hold.
And that's why anytime you have these long-term advantages, he's up a pawn in a middle game, you're kind of screwed because you can defend perfectly for 30 moves, which Fabi did. He's going to get you down on the clock, and then he's going to find some arrangement of pieces to trick you every single time. He does it in classical chess, and he's adapted himself perfectly to blitz. I mean, he's carried over that skill from classical to blitz, which is just so impressive to me.
Yeah. All right, well, back to another theoretical battle. Note that, are you okay?
Sorry about that. I muted myself, but
you didn't. We heard every minute.
You heard that cough. I apologize.
We heard that cough.
It was a bad coffee swallow. I know the expression in Russian. You say, "I swallowed down the wrong throat," but I don't know the equivalent. It's like when you have a bad down the wrong tube. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Anyway, note that Magnus didn't go back for the classical to the classical Nimzo, which means I think he liked Fabi's position there. If you're just tuning in, game one was an interesting classical Nimzo where Fabi went for it with black and frankly had a very good position before time pressure, and then Magnus kind of squeezed one out. But here Magnus avoids the mainline Nimzo. Instead, we are in a Catalan. It's just always interesting to note who varied first, right? We had a Nimzo starting, and Magnus said, I don't want another classical Nimzo. So just always making little notes about how they're shuffling.
Yeah, this is such a popular line, popular structure. And to be completely honest with you, Danny, I'm a little bit skeptical of Fabi's opening choice here, because in this line, you're basically playing for two results. I mean, black has a lot of activity on the queen side, but Magnus just loves these positions where he's up a pawn, and he can squeeze a small advantage for 30, 40 moves. So Fabi better be super accurate here with his king-queen side activity, or we're going to get a repeat of the last game.
Yep.
Ooh.
Little advantages converted by Magnus.
What a move.
Wait,
sorry, Danny, go ahead.
No, wait, if takes, the G2 bishop falls.
But queen takes B4.
And there's a rook hanging on. Okay, analysis board, please.
No. Bishop takes G5, immediately queen takes B4.
Oh, queen takes B4 immediately. Okay. For kids who don't chess good but highlight good, let me show you. Takes. There's a few kids in the chat who don't chess as good as others, but they do love learning visually. I'm your man. You're welcome, chat. And note that if you take here first, white can even take here with tempo, and then you got problems. So actually, turns out Danya was right. Bishop G5 checks out. We get take. Black keeps the bishop pair, but note white's still up a pawn. And if we get a single knight versus bishop minor piece dynamic, that's a winnable endgame for white on one side of the board.
It most certainly is. And Fabi playing this so well. He's just taking it to Magnus. Queen E4 and E5. He had to find those moves. Now the queen on B4 the pawn on D4 is pinned. Rook D1 takes, rook D8. And I think he's winning the pawn back. And the moment he does, you can basically agree to a draw. Maybe F3 should be tried here by Magnus, but that's a risky move. Then you're playing for 3 results.
Yep.
But maybe it should be tried.
Ooh, F3. Kick that queen out, free up my ability to trade on E5. As you said, you definitely don't want black to take on D4. Even if you're not winning the pawn, that isolates the pawn, and probably black picks it up later. So the queen's going to move. That's going to unpin the pawn, which means white is going to take on E5, I'm imagining.
Obviously, a queen trade would be ideal here for white.
I was going to say the other move was queen B1, but okay, he does it now. I like that.
Good
call. Queen B1.
Yeah,
one
practically.
One difference we got to know from the last game is it's a small advantage again for Magnus. He does it better than anyone, but Fabi up a minute on the clock almost, and that's a big change. Fabi has sped up.
He's sped up. He has plenty of time to defend this, but I would totally ignore the eval bar here. This is exactly the kind of position Magnus excels in. Like I said,
Yep.
he's up
Yep.
a pawn, and the compensation is pretty clear. White's king is weak. The second rank is weak. Fabio's going to deploy his rook to b8 or c8 on the next move, or maybe even d8. But Magnus can torture this out for an indefinite period of time, and he's going to try to push his pawns in the right way and get the queens off the board. But Fabio should totally hold this.
And we talked about that. I'll just add a little more context. The reason why we said the knight versus bishop dynamic is more winnable than, let's say, bishop versus bishop is the knight thrives when everything is on one side of the board. It gets to switch colors. Okay, thanks, Captain Obvious, but it's super important. The knight can poke and prod and then go to a different color. And so the knights, in time pressure especially, thrive in these games. So this is not nearly as easy as the eval bar is saying it is. And if you had a bishop versus bishop, I'd be calling this game as a draw, and he's just using time. But knight versus bishop, White is legitimately playing for a win here.
Yeah, and h5 from Fabius, he tries to drum up some concrete play against White's king. He wants that pawn on h3 to create the long-term precedent of mate threats. I love the move h5, and big question for Magnus, does he push e5 and then play queen e4, or will he bite off more than he can chew? No,
I think he does. There's also even... Okay, he goes queen e4 right away. I thought if queen f5 and deuce g6, then you come back and there's more threats of e6. Okay, he goes queen e4 right away.
Okay, Fabi occupies the open file. Sensible move.
Sensible.
Yes. Whoa.
Yes.
And then knight e3, you could try to activate the knight, Danny, but then the rook infiltrates d2.
Yeah.
And then you start sweating, because then, you know, it becomes a 3-result game once again.
I was going to say, the one thing going for black here is exactly what you said. This second rank is not something that you can turn your back on.
Yep. Magnus
this
thinking.
Rook is, he's thinking, and he's down more than a minute on the clock. So Fabi holding his own, sticking in it.
Well, given that he's up 2-0, I think Magnus is going to err on the side of caution.
Yep.
Or not, as he pushes f5. He just feels invincible right now.
I was distracted by the chat comment that said if I had Magnus's hair, I'd be unbeatable. I agree. Sorry. So, no, he's not sitting tight. He has f6 coming, e6 coming. By the way, queen e2 now. Okay, he's going to check and then go to f3 with Tempe. If the king goes to h7.
I thought he might try to go at f6 on the next move, but then actually Fabi can take twice on f6. Notice the knight on g2 is blocking the king's Luft square.
Yep, take, bishop take, shake and bake, rook takes. You've got rook to d1, game over, so you got to be careful. I think he'll play queen f3.
Agreed. And then Fabi should take on e5.
I was going to say, does he just exchange e for h? And actually, that's a favorable exchange for black, for sure.
Oh, 100%. Because then even if the queens are off the board, God forbid, that is a lot more drawable for black. So queen f3 is kind of an admission that, my winning chances are super limited. But otherwise, again, White might risk losing. Maybe e6 can be considered here.
Yeah. And if you're the defender in these positions, everyone, you want to trade pawns. And the more you trade pawns equally, assuming nothing else bad happens along with those exchanges, in theory, you're getting closer and closer to an endgame you can hold. So okay, e6, as you said, what's the main point? Obviously, you don't want to take. But what else are you supposed to do? I guess you have to.
I think you have to take. And I was thinking maybe White wants some queen e8, queen takes h5 shenanigans. But again, the threat of the back rank check persists even if the queens are off the board. So I just think Magnus is going to recapture and try to use the e6 pawn as a decoy and go after that h5 pawn. And Black is starting to suddenly experience problems for the first time in this middle game with his own king.
Yeah.
Okay,
and this is why I said you don't want to take, because of this idea. Also, the f-file feels super dangerous. Okay, now Fabi's all in. This is kind of instructive in that he's playing active defense. He knows he can't just sit tight. He's got to create counterplay.
He's played active defense for the duration of this defensive task. And it's been great. h4, another good move. He's just trying to get all the pawns off the board.
Yep.
And h3 is very tempting, but the knight jumps into f4, and suddenly things get dicey there. You could lose that h3 pawn.
Note how key the queen is defensively, guarding both h5 and f5 here. Massive.
This is still very difficult for Black, but Magnus down below 20 seconds.
Bobby correctly managing his time here. We always talk about the difference between taking your time and managing your time. He had an edge on the clock. That was a big decision. And look, the eval bar agrees with him. He made the right one with HG, not H3. And he took a few seconds to make sure he made the appropriate and critical pawn decision.
And he's whittled the pawn count down to a 2 versus 1. Obviously, if he wins e6, it's just an insta draw. Actually, then the bishop might be stronger than the knight. So maybe it's time for queen f5 check, which is not quite a draw for White. Could still squeeze for a couple moves there, but Fabio's going to hold that. And Magnus making the prudent decision.
The rook can come behind the pawn. You get king here and bishop f6. This should be holdable now.
Well, rook e4, knight f4, bishop d6 might be just a forced draw because you lose e6, I think.
Yeah, straightforward. Bishop d6. Fabio finds it.
Yeah,
he's going to make the exchange. We have a draw. Magnus is going to play it out. Now, as far as the meta strategy goes, because of the match format with the time ticking down, and because Magnus believes he's the better player with faster time controls, everyone,